Good evening, guys. Welcome back to those that have been with us before, and hello to everyone that's joining us for the first time. A big warm welcome. So today, this evening, unfortunately the weather isn't what it was like last week, but we're going to be doing a rosé tasting. We're going to be going from pale to pink, and hopefully we're going to try some rosés that are fairly new to you, maybe some rosés that are some classics that you know before, and we're going to maybe try some wines that you might want to try again in the future. So, just a little bit of a description of what we're going to be doing this evening. So, firstly, we're going to go from we're going to go do a little bit of a recap on how to taste wine. I know most of you will have done it for the last 2 weeks, but there are some new people joining us this week. So we'll do a very brief, quick recap on how you taste wine, because I'm sure you're all very good at drinking it. Tasting it is something slightly different. We're then going to go quickly on how rosé is made. So it is made slightly differently to red wine and white wine, which we've been discussing before. So we'll go through quickly how those big rosé styles are made. Then we're going to try the samples. So we've got 4 samples today. We've got going from very pale to all the way to quite big, robust kind of rosés, and we'll see which ones you guys like. Hopefully you've got some sort of food there or some charcuterie or nibbles to try it with, to see what you like, what matches well with what. And the wines that we're going to be trying are sort of from the rosé capitals of the world, with a couple of other kind of sort of new or quirky different wines thrown in just to see what you think. And then at the end, we'll be doing a little bit of a question and answer session using the chat bar. I'd really encourage all of you to, if you've got a Gmail account, just to log into your YouTube, just so you can ask questions as and when. And I'd really encourage you just to ask whenever you want. And if there are any issues, just let me know. Send me through the questions, queries, or issues that you have on the bar, and I will respond as quickly as possible. So hopefully you're all sat down, ready to try your wines. And I think we should just crack on, really. So, Raz number 1. So I'll be trying them all with you. I haven't tried, some of them I haven't tried before, so this will be quite an interesting one for me, as well as you guys. So, firstly, how to try wine. So it's really simple. It's the 3 things that you're looking for are colour, the aroma, and the nose. Good evening, James. And then finally, the flavour, what's on the palate. So colour is more important with rosé than any other wine. Everyone buys it on the colour. Everyone thinks they know what it's going to taste like because of what it looks like. And the thing that you want it to look like is vibrant, refreshing, sparkly almost in terms of colour, and you want it to be crisp and attractive and make you salivate when you want to drink it. And this is exactly what this one does. It's quite clear, it's crisp, it's vibrant. The second thing you're looking at is the nose. So give it a swirl round, and what you're doing there is you're just releasing all those kind of flavours that you want to pick up, those aromas. And that will give you flavours that are fruity, and they come from the grape. So you've got primary, secondary, and tertiary flavours. So the first ones are primary, and that's what the grape gives you. So those are fruits, those are flowers, those are anything that you consider something that the grape gives you. The second thing that you're looking for are secondary flavours. They are what the winemaker gives you. So any creaminess, any oakiness, any kind of richness and texture that he's made from actually making the wine, and how he's actually made it. And then the final thing is tertiary. Now tertiary is flavours that have developed and evolved in the bottle. Now because we're dealing with rosés are meant to be fresh, young, vibrant. We won't really be picking up any of those this evening, but it's always good to know, and it's always good to try and pick it out, because there are some rosés, not ones we're tasting tonight, that do have those kind of tertiary flavours. So that's how you taste wine. Then how to make wine, and also please have carry on sipping as I'm talking through. Making rosé, you can make it in sort of 3 main ways. The first way is called the Sanier method, and that's called bleeding. And basically, it's a A lot of people don't consider it actually a way of making rosé. It's kind of a cheating way, because what you're doing is when you're making a red wine, what they want to do is try and concentrate those flavors. So what they do is they bleed off Saignée, bleed off the wine, and it's put it in the bottle, and then they sell it as a sort of byproduct of making red wine. It's a really dark, really intense color, and quite a big, full-bodied rosé. The second way of making rosé is basically skin contact and what we call early press. So you start making off the rosé as a red wine. You pick the grapes, they've got those red skins. You then macerate them or leave them on their skin contact, for about 12 to 24 hours. And that color and the phenolics from the grape and the tannin and some antioxidants drain from the grape skin and get into the wine, which gives it that pale pink salmon color. So they do that for about 12 to 24 hours. So that's the same way you do it to make a red wine, but red wine, it's usually days or probably several weeks. Once you've done that, you then take it off and then you start fermenting it as if it were a white wine, so quite in what you'd call a cool temperature. So most wines, and actually all the wines we're going to be trying tonight, are made on that kind of early press skin contact style, rather than the Saignée method, which is the kind of, as we said, bleeding off. The third way is fairly simple. It's just getting a red wine and a white wine and blending it together to make a rosé. If it's sold in Europe, it's not legally allowed to be called a rosé if it's done through that method, except for one region, and that one region is Champagne. So, and the reason for that is when those laws came in on how to make rosé, Champagne were making rosé in a blended way before those laws came in. So rather than banning them from doing it, they made an exception that the only way you can make rosé blended is in Champagne. So anyway, I think that's enough on how to make wine, because it's the dry stuff. Got that out of the way. And now we're going to go probably to, sample number one. So if we do that kind of tasting characteristic, you go colour, nose, palate, you've got a really light, almost kind of salmon kind of colour to it. And the nose, it's a very light, it's very fruity, get lots of strawberries, I get lots of cream, get real floral kind of flavours to it as well. A bit of vanilla as well, kind of like a vanilla spice to it. So, no, Andy, you have not missed the first one. I've just seen that comment. So this is the first one, number one. So everyone take a sip, see what you think. I hope you enjoy it. So when you're trying it in the mouth, when you're trying it on the palate, what you're trying to do is get some air in, swirl it around your mouth, and you're trying to break down those flavors. And what you're looking for is acidity, you're looking for alcohol, and you're looking for body. So acidity is very simple. It's the amount of saliva that builds up in the mouth. It's the refreshing part of a wine. It's really important to make it fresh and easy to drink. So all these rosés, because they're looking for wines that are easy to drink, for the sun, refreshing, they will have a good amount of acidity in them. Second one is the alcohol. So the alcohol is that warming sensation you get on the back of the palate. This one is kind of medium. It doesn't overblow, but you still got it there. And then body, how light is it or how heavy it is. So the lighter it is, more delicate like water, all the way up to full-bodied, rich, kind of opulent wines. This is, again, I think quite a light one. It's quite delicate. But even though all those flavors are delicate, it's got a lot of different flavors. So and they're evolving in the mouth, and the finish, the amount of time those good flavors that you're looking for and paying for, the amount of time they stay on the mouth is quite long. So it's got quite a long finish. It's actually a really tasty little wine, I think. It's a very floral kind of style, yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to do now is reveal what it is. And we're going to go through them one by one. So wine number one is really light, delicate, strawberries, cream. That means it's probably from one place, and that's Provence. And this wine is from a producer called Domaine de Trien, 2019. So vintage is really important with rosé. You want it as young as possible. So 2019 is the youngest vintage it's going to be. So if you ever see the big names like Whispering Angel or Miraval or Domaine Arts or all those big names, and they want a really good offer, often it's because it's the last vintage that they need to get rid of before the new vintage arrives. So someone said, what does overblow in the mouth mean? I don't know. I don't know if I've said that. I've got no idea. So yeah, so Trien, a little bit about this little rosé. It's made by two amazing winemakers. It was set up in 1989. It was made by a guy called Jacques Cies and Aubert Villin, and they're both from Burgundy. One is the winemaker of Domaine Romanée-Conti, and the other is a winemaker of Domaine Dujac. So two really prestigious Burgundy producers that sell their wines for hundreds and thousands of pounds a bottle. What they wanted to do was they wanted to go to the south of France and find a really nice place to make simple, delicious rosé. And they went to a place in Provence called Var, and it's a really nice hill in Var, and it's become one of the pinnacle places of Provence to make rosé. It's one of the finest hills. Excuse me. And where it is, if you imagine it, it's real truffle country. It's where vines have grown for over 2,000 years. Lots of olive trees there that make really good olive oil. The rule of thumb is if you can make good olive oil, you can make good Provence rosé. So you'll often find olive trees in the vineyards alongside, and you'll often find Provence rosé producers also producing olive oil. The name Trien comes from the Latin Trienna, which was a Roman festival which was put on every year to honour the god of wine Bacchus. The other interesting about Provence rosés is they tend to always be blended. So this is a big blend. It's got Syrah, it's got Viognier, it's got Carignan, it's got Cinsault, it's got Chardonnay, it's got Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's got Merlot. And what they've done is they've taken every little bit of those different grapes and balanced it to make their perfect kind of delicious rosé. And so it's got a little bit of structure, it's got delicate flavours, it's got lovely floral flavours, which are probably from the Viognier and the Chardonnay. It's got a little bit of body and texture, and it's just absolutely delicious. I think it's a fantastic little rosé. I think it's also, this kind of style is the most popular, definitely, that we sell as an industry. Everyone wants Provence rosé, which is a good little segue into wine number 2. So if everyone grabs their second test tube with the number 2 on and crack it open and give it a try. And so these first two are going to be the lighter kind of delicate styles. So, right, using the same kind of tasting method of colour, nose, palate. Again, beautifully delicate, almost salmon kind of pink. It's got a little bit of a gold tinge to it as well. It's a really vibrant, delicious wine. If you swirl it around, you can see the legs on it are really kind of, they're there present, but they're not too big, so it kind of makes you think that it's not going to be too structured a wine. Give it a swirl, and the flavours I get is just really, again, a lovely kind of citrusness to it, actually. So I get pink grapefruit, I get sort of fleshy fruits as well, like stones and stone fruits like apricots and melon and kind of like fruit tart. It's kind of a tarty one. It's a really nice little one. Now, when people say how intense is a wine, this is a really interesting example, because you get some wines that are just very intense, that you stick your nose anywhere near it and it just shoots your face off. Like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs are famous for it. You crack it open and you can smell it from across the room. This wine is equally as intense, but in a very different way. I mean, it doesn't hit you it doesn't hit you in the face, but when you stick your nose in, It's got lots of different flavors, and it's really interesting. And you can smell it for quite a while before having to actually try it. So this wine, still delicate, a lot more citrus, a lot more structure to it. So it's actually quite, it's a lot more acidic, I think, actually. It's got a little bit more body. It's just got a little bit more going to it, really. Definitely got more citrus notes to it, though, as well. This could be a little bit more of a food wine, actually. So I think this would go really well with salads that need a bit of an acidity cut through them. It would go really well with carpaccios or shellfish. So this wine, if you're finding a little bit, it's still very delicate, so you probably won't. But if maybe it's a little bit less easy to drink than the first one you tried, I'd probably recommend pairing it with a little bit of food, because that structure's there, because it gives you a little bit more. That structure there enables it to give you a bit more flavour to it. So this wine here, hopefully you liked it. I think if you didn't, it's really subjective, so it really doesn't matter if you like it or not. Hopefully you do. But wine number 2 is a very famous wine. It is the Domaine Haute. So Domaine Haute is from the Provençal region, and it's known as probably the most famous Provençal rosé. It's from a region called Bandol. Bandol are famous for their red wines that are 100% Mourvèdre. This was founded in 1912 by a guy called Marcel Haute, who was an agricultural engineer who just wanted to make a really good rosé. So he planted this vineyard, Chateau Remassin, in the 1950s, and that is right in the heart of Bandol. This is a blend again, so Provence rosés tend to always be blends. The main compartment of this wine is Mourvèdre, again quite a strong, full-bodied, rich red grape, and they've blended it with a bit of Grenache, a bit of Cinsault, and a bit of Syrah. Again, all those different grapes just add something to it. And I've been asked to hold it up again. So, Domaine Haute, and it's from the Chateau Remassin, and it's a lovely little, and it's got that famous Provençal flute to it. It's a bit more expensive than the first one. So the first one was £14.95 a bottle. This one is £34. So it's a fine wine. And I think with that extra money, you do get more structure, you do get more power to it, and I think it's often overlooked kind of how good it is, because it is a well-known name, and I think a lot of people buy it because of the name rather than what's actually in the bottle. But it's a really, really outstandingly good wine, I think. And it's just so easy to drink, which is what you're looking for from a rosé. It looks good, great for hot weather like we're having at the moment, and just easy to drink. Would go really well with shellfish as well. So that is wine number 2. Just seeing if we've got any. Hold up the bottle again. Right, so there we go. So £34 for that one. Trium is 15. I think you can agree it gives you more than the first one, hopefully. But whether you think it's worth the money, that's completely up to you. It's quite an expensive wine, £34. But they are the most prestigious rosé out there. So I think we should go for number 3, unless there are any questions. Not really, no. There we go. Right, number 3. So, number 3 is a little bit of a turn point. So, we have gone from France, and we're not going back to France now. That's France done. So, the other 2 are not from France. So, from another country, you're starting to get a little bit of a darker colour to it. So, if you compare to the first, compared to the first one, it's just a little bit darker. You can't really see in this light, but trust me, you guys can see it. A little bit more darker, a little bit more colour. Now, it's made in the same way as the first 2, so it's going through that method of skin contact. So if it's a little bit darker, it means it's had a little bit more skin contact. So that color from the skin has seeped into the wine a bit more and has had a bit more of those tannins, those phenolics, those antioxidants just seep into the must of the wine. The biggest fallacy, the biggest myth in wine to do with rosé is that the darker it is, the sweeter it is. It's just completely untrue. So just to kind of put the rebel straight, these are all dry rosés, all dry wines, has nothing to do with sweetness. The reason people think it is because those American wines like Echo Falls, they added sugar in at the end and they tended to be quite dark anyway. So people, with the fashion going towards Provence, that paler is better, this is created a fallacy where fuller bodied rosés tend not to be selling well, to the point now where we're getting wines from regions that was traditionally quite rich, full bodied, dark in colour are actually becoming more and more pale, and they're making them lighter to follow the trends in the market, which for me sometimes is a bit of a shame because I really like the kind of more slightly robust rosés. So number 3, pour it in. Again, colour, yeah, I mean a lot darker. We're starting to get that kind of bit more salmon colour now, a bit more sort of orange hue to it. Very vibrant. Give it a swirl. Now the fruit flavour is a little bit more, yeah, a little bit more kind of fuller, fresh fruit. So I'm getting lots of strawberry, getting some more raspberries now, maybe hinting into cherry. I've just had a question here. What's the alcohol content of number 2? It's usually about, yeah, it's 13.5%. So again, that would kind of explain why you're getting more structure there. So yeah, and the first one, alcohol-wise, probably similar, maybe a bit less, 13%, so half a degree, yeah, less. So this, yeah, back to the rosé, back to number 3. What I'm going to say now is everyone using their using the chat room, whereas the first 2 were blends, this is a single grape variety. And the first person to guess the right grape variety, I'm going to send out a free bottle of this wine on me if they like it, just to make it a little bit more interactive. So, yeah, the flavour-wise, a bit more intense, a bit more fleshy, a bit more full-bodied. And those flavours you're getting on the nose are the same on the palate, just a bit richer, a bit more round, really still refreshing. So that acidity is just cutting through. So I think what scares a lot of people about the concept of fuller-bodied, darker rosés is they won't be nearly as fresh. And this one is. It's really lovely and fresh because it's grown on a place with the right soil, the right hillsides, which retains the acidity, and that acidity makes it nice and fresh. So we've got, someone put Shiraz, good guess, but no. Someone's put Pinot, good guess, but no. Cabernet, no. So we haven't had any answer yet. So, right, I'm going to give you Chardonnay. It's not Chardonnay, unfortunately. It's from the region of Spain, if that helps. One of my favourite regions. And it's it's from a grape type in a region of Spain called Navarra, and they are famous for. And Joseph has got it right. It is Grenache. So I'll take your details later, and we'll send you out a bottle because, yeah, Grenache. So Spain is famous for Grenache. They make great. It's usually made for reds that are sort of powerful, alcoholic, robust, full-bodied, fruity, and you can get some really good quality ones now as well. So sort of really aging ones. One of my favourite reds at the moment, those who tuned in a couple of weeks ago, I showed them an old vine Grenache when they asked me what my favourite red at the moment was. They're making really good rosés too, and this is a collaboration between two ladies. So this is the label here. It's called Ross, and it's from Navarra. It's made by Lynn Coyle, who is an MW from Ireland, and it's made from a Spanish winemaker called Alicia. and they got together, found some really good plots that made old vine Grenache. So the trick with Grenache is the vines need to be as old as possible, because the older they are, the better the fruits, the better the wine. So they found some really nice old vine Grenache on really chalky and clay soils and made this lovely fruity wine. So to put where Navarra is, this is from a place called the Yeri Valley, which is fairly close to Pamplona, so where that big festival happens every year. This is where it's from, and it's, yeah, like I said, vibrant pink, lots of wild berries as well, strawberry and raspberry. It kind of, yeah, fruits of the forest almost. And yeah, it's got a lovely long finish and bone dry. Yeah, so please, one thing to take away from this is, if you're buying rosé, do not be scared if it's a little bit darker in hue, because they can give you really refreshing fruity wines, and they go really well with food. So this would go great with tuna niçoise. It would go really well with seafood, shellfish. It would actually go well with things like lamb if you're having meat and you didn't want something as heavy as a red. So I'm just going to go through what people have been putting down. So, so a lot of people like this. Oh, I'm glad some people kind of agree with me here. So I had someone ask me, is it in a supermarket, is the best way to buy a dry rosé one that's lighter in colour? Probably not. No, I think again it's just a myth. The best way to stay away from sweet rosés is don't go for the big commercial labels from America, because they will be sweets. And then there are one or two regions in France, Anjou is an example, that tend to be sweet or medium dry. So on the whole, they will be all dry with a hint, maybe a dash of sugar, but not enough to really kind of affect it to make it a sweet wine. So I think light and crisp will always be dry, but they can be quite boring, especially from a supermarket. So I'd actually go the opposite way. I'd go sort of medium bodied, a little bit of colour, gives you a bit more fruit and a bit more body to it, and they're perfectly good in this kind of climate, because rosés are always made to be drunk in hot weather. So you're never going to find one, no matter if it's good quality or bad quality, there's not going to be refreshingly good in the summer. But I mean, I'm pushing against the tide here, because most people will still buy Provence rosé. It's definitely the nation's favourite style of rosé at the moment. This one is, again, the same price as the first one, $14.95. So a really good price point for good quality rosé. So I think it's it's a good little 15 quid bottle of wine. A little bit of fig someone has put. I get that. It's a kind of, it is richer. It's wild fruits. It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of more. I get maraschino cherry a little bit. You know, that kind of lovely intense cherry flavour. One of my favourite little wines at that kind of price point. We are going to go for number 4. So if you're worried about number 3 being a little bit too dark, wait for number 4, because it's even darker. And wait till you see it in the bottle. It's really, really dark. So you don't really get to see it in the test tube. But so everyone crack that one open. And this one is a Sidewinder. It is so different from the other 3. And again, if what I'll do is a little competition here. The first person to guess where it's from wins a bottle of it, on me as well, because I think this is a really interesting one. But only if you like it, because this might not be to everybody's taste. So pick it up again, swirl it round, look at the colour. I mean, it's really, really dark compared to the other 2. It's kind of getting more to a brick colour. And the nose is really, really powerful. So the way they make this is slightly different from the other 3, and that's how they've got the colour out. So it's picked from the winery, sorry, from the vineyard. It's driven in. They then cold press it, cold soak it. So just cold soak it for a couple of hours, which just kind of, best way to describe that is it retains the freshness of the grapes for longer. Yeah, it retains the freshness of the grapes for longer. And we've got an answer. Someone's got it right. It retains the freshness for longer. And then what they do is they ferment it. Sorry, they press it, get all that juice out. They then ferment it. They then ferment it in oak for the fermentation, which gives it more texture and body and a bit of. It won't give it much oakiness because I don't think they use new oak. They then age it for 6 months on the lees. Now, lees is basically dead yeast after you've finished the fermentation. So fermentation is really simple. It's grape juice with sugar plus yeast, turns it, releases carbon dioxide, which goes into the atmosphere, releases alcohol, which makes the wine, and then you're left with dead yeast. And when you make a fresh wine, you rack that yeast off, you take the wine off the yeast as quickly as possible. Some places, so Burgundy is a really famous region for doing it, don't do that. They leave the yeast in there, or the fine yeast, and they leave it there for a few weeks, give it a stir, and as they stir it, that yeast kind of breaks down and produces some texture to the wine. So it's a really textured wine. And yeah, it's really expressive. I mean, there's a lot of flavors going on there. I get a kind of sort of, wild cherry, strawberries, cream. Yeah, a kind of sort of almost acetaldehyde kind of smell to it as well. Delicious. So, yeah, a lot richer than the other three. So the first one, if you think, was the lightest in style. We're going from pale to pink. So really light, delicate, like drinking deliciously flavored water almost. All the way to this, it's got body, it coats your mouth. It's got, lovely kind of flavors to it there. So the answers, let's see what people have put. So Spain, it's not from Spain. Sicily, not from Sicily. Good guesses. Germany, that's close, but no, it's not Germany. Spain, I can see why you've done that with the colour, but it's not Spain. Australia, Greece, Israel, no. China, well, they're making wines, but I don't think it's from China yet. It's not from China. Portugal, no. So the answer is, and the first person to do it is James, who, the UK, it is English. It is from an urban winery in the Arches under Battersea, and it's called The Black Book. And the grapes are from Essex. They're from Crouch Valley Vineyard. This wine is 100% Pinot Noir. And that Pinot Noir gives it just ridiculously high acidity. So this is the highest acidity of all the four that we've tried. And yeah, it just it just makes it so refreshing, even though it's really full-bodied and textured. It's just quite interesting. It's got a sort of almost kerosene-y kind of smell to it as well. Yeah, this is £24 as well, so pretty good, decent whack of money for it. But I think you're getting a lot of flavour there for a rosé, and it definitely would go well with meats, pork. This would go really well with like a really good piece of pork belly. It's definitely for me a meal wine, but on the same time it's so refreshing it could be had on its own. Yeah, just absolutely delicious. So what have we got people saying here? Yeah, I can see it would go really well with like mushrooms and truffles because they're kind of umami flavors, and that acidity would just cut through it. So someone put they can't accept that this is English. Yeah, England decided to make really good wines away from sparkling wine. So that's what we're famous for at the moment, is making traditional method sparkling wines in the style of champagne, maybe a little bit more citrusy and light and than champagne. But yeah, we're starting to push into some really good rosés. They make some really good Chardonnay as well, this producer, Black Book. So I'll just show the bottle again, just for those that want to see it. And the winemaker is a guy called Sergio. And he's named this wine, I'd Rather Be a Rebel Rosé. So he's just made it simply because he wanted it to be a little bit more different to the prevailing wind of what we're doing at the moment. And yeah, I think, it just shows that this is a guy he picks wines from driving distance from London, and he puts in brackets not taking into account congestion, because sometimes that makes it a little bit more than a couple of hours. But without congestion, the wines come from only a couple of hours away from Battersea. They are proper Essex grapes, as Bex Swan has James says. James, who got it right, is celebrating. I will have to send you a little bottle in the post next time we do a little order with you. So absolutely, it's a good little wine, I think. So please keep your questions coming through. I've noticed we've gone through these quite quickly. But rosés, I think, compared to the other tastings we do, are just so easy to drink, and they just express them from themselves. The hardest question I get with rosé is, can you tell me the difference between these rosés? And they're pointing at rosés from completely the same region. They're all from Provence, and trying to describe the difference between different Provençal rosés is quite tricky. But I think I've picked two from Provence that are very different. It's both in price point and in character. And I think this just hopefully highlights the different range of wines that you can get from from that category of rosé. So questions: could you make a spritzer with it? I think you can make a spritzer with, definitely. Why not? I think a little bit of water, maybe turbo it with a bit of gin. I think that would go really well. The last one, I think it's so nice on its own. You don't need to make it a spritzer, but the rest of them, definitely. If people could start putting what their favourite was, that would be really good. One of my thoughts on sparkling rosé. So if we take champagne, I think that they so what they do with champagne is they make a sparkling white, and then they add a little bit of red wine to make it a rosé, and then they ferment it and make it sparkling. They are good. What they do is it adds a kind of red fruit characteristic to it. So it adds some raspberry flavors, some strawberry, some cherry. As they get older and develop and age, they start to get kind of marmalade, orange, Seville orange kind of flavors, which are absolutely delicious. My hesitation with them is the price point. They are a lot more expensive than classical standard champagnes. And for me, they sometimes mask those richer flavors that you're looking for in a champagne. So you're sometimes looking for kind of biscuity, rich flavors. And I sometimes find that the rosé masks them slightly. And I've been to wine tastings, and I've had their non-vintage white, and then their non-vintage rosé, then their vintage white, and their vintage rosé. And the rosés are always a lot more expensive, and the answer that they have to it is because they can charge more. It's only 5% of the champagne market, so they can put the prices up, and they are always a lot more expensive because the demand's there, and it's simply the demand. So it's whether they're worth paying a little bit more for, in your opinion. For me, I love just classic champagnes, but there's always time for a champagne rosé. I'll never turn down a glass if you're offering. That's the rule for me. So, is the darker the rosé, the fruitier it is? I think that's a really good way of describing it. I think you get more fresh fruits. I think you get more body to it. So I think that's a really good way. With the cheaper rosés, so ones that we haven't tried tonight that are under £10, what you start to get is more kind of candied fruits. So rather than fresh fruits, you get far more, feels like you're taking like a boiled sweet. You get kind of boiled sweet flavors, but they definitely are more fruity, whether it's boiled sweet or fresh fruit with the more expensive styles. So I think that's a really good way of describing it. Paler ones are crisp, delicate, a little bit of fruit. They get more fruity and richer as they get fuller body and colour. Right. Can I recommend a spritzer with the last one? If so, what would I recommend to put with it? So I would probably do it with a bit of tonic if you're going to make a spritzer with it, because I think it's got enough body to stand up to more of those botanical flavors. So the last one, if you do want to make a spritzer, I'd recommend not doing it, to be honest with you. I think it's a really good, nice wine on its own to have with food. But if you really want to make a spritzer, I'd go a little bit edgy, slice of orange, and a little bit of tonic with it as well. Number 3 and number 1 are the favourites. Okay, number 1, a lot of number 1s. 1s and 4. So let's have a look. So someone's put, I often drink rosé for extended periods. What would be your I'm drinking for the next 7 hours rosé be? I would, out of these 3, if I wasn't paying, it would be Domaine Ott, because I think it's just a sensational bottle of wine, and I think you get a lot for it. If I am paying, and I have to go, I'll put my budget down back to £15. I'd go this on a hot day. I think it's just so easy to drink. It's just fruity. I love Spanish wines. I've grown up with a lot of them because of my family being in Spain every summer, my mum speaking Spanish, me learning Spanish, going to Mexico, which I wouldn't recommend for wines at the moment, but apparently they're getting pretty good. But I would definitely go that as my next 7-day drinking wine. The last few cases of wine I've sold, it's been that one that I've recommended, because I think it's just easy to drink. It's dangerously easy to drink. What else have we got? Very fatty meat for number 4. Yeah, absolutely, because someone's put number 4 would go really well with fatty meat, and I think it definitely would, because it's got such high acidity. It's got such a it's got that, and that high acidity will just cut through any fat in any dish. So pork belly, shoulder of pork, shoulder of lamb, that would go really well with. Oh, that shoulder of lamb, perfect. I might, if anyone invites me around for a barbecue and they are slow cooking a shoulder of lamb this week, I will bring that. So there we go. I'm bribing you to invite me around for a barbecue. What other questions have we got? Number 3 is a clear winner, chicken dinner. Right, well, number 3, I would agree, is my favourite at the moment, really. Luckily, I had someone pull out last minute, so I've got another one. So I might just make another little try and just double check that it is okay. So just to recap on them. So number 1, the Trienne. So the Trienne, made by 2 great Burgundian producers from Domaine Ott and Domaine Dujac. Light, delicate, pale, from Provence, from a region called Var, which is a lovely big hill. The flavours are really delicate, strawberries and cream, a little bit of vanilla. And what you'll notice with this one, which I didn't really mention, is so these guys are the most prestigious winemakers in the world. They wanted to make a simple rosé that wasn't too expensive, which is why it's in a fairly indistinct bottle. It's got a fairly simple label. They haven't got really a marketing budget with it, so they just charged it at 15 quid, and they just thought, we want to make a good, decent wine that's not too expensive, and they've delivered it in heaps and bounds. So a really nice, light, delicate, fruity wine. Number 2 was the Domaine Ott. So Domaine Ott, in that beautiful Provençal flute, for this one from Chateau Remasson, which is the vineyard in the centre of Bandol. Still light and delicate, very pale in colour, but a bit more structure, a bit more body to it, a little bit more spicy. Goes really well with delicate foods, shellfish, chicken salads, things like that. Number 3, looks like it's a lot of favourites. Number 3, the Ros Navarro Rosé. So made in Navarro by 2 really talented women. £15 a bottle, a little bit darker in colour, and yeah, 100% Grenache. I'll need to go back through to see who won that. I can't remember, but they are getting a nice bottle of rosé. Yeah, just fruity, refreshing, medium-bodied, a little bit more pink to it, a little bit more wild fruits, like fruits of the forest. Really well, yeah, really well with, you know, Tuna Niçoise, I think would go really well with that. And then the final one, the Rebel Rosé. So if you just look at the colour between that one and number one, there's a huge difference. So made by Sergio in Battersea, £24 a bottle, 100% Pinot Noir, barrel fermented, barrel aged, lees aged, to produce a really lovely, refreshing, interesting, different wine rosé that can go with foods and things. So that's pretty much the recap of it all. This one's gone a little bit quicker than the other ones, which I suppose isn't necessarily a bad thing for those people that are getting tired of my voice. But if there are any questions, I will keep going for a couple of minutes, because yeah, I don't want to shortchange people. For me, I think the number 4 is the most. Number 3 is my favourite to drink, but number 4 is my favourite because it's just different and interesting and slightly, yeah, and it actually does, you know, it just shows that you can make really good rosés from England, and it's got just a lovely texture to it. Grapefruit as well, a lot of grapefruit in that, I think. Yeah, no, watermelon. That's what I get. Watermelon. Yeah, a lot of watermelon in number 4. But it's just a really interesting wine to have. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, unless there are any other questions. One of my favourite rosé cru, Roseville Rose, strawberries and cream. Not one I've heard of, but I'll look into it because I love trying new wines. Yeah, hope you all enjoyed it. If anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Final thing, if you do want to buy any of these wines, we can give you a 10% discount and delivery with that included as part of this sort of tasting little club we're doing. I might try and do another one in a couple of weeks. I'm thinking maybe Italy or Spain or a mixture of the two. I will try and do something that's opposite of what the weather is, because when I chose to do the rosé one, it was beamingly hot, beautiful, late 20-degree evenings, and come to do it, overcast and muggy. So yeah, thank you all for joining in. Thank you all for being part of this. And yeah, if you have any requests for the next one, please do let me know, and I'll try and accommodate. So thanks very much, guys. I'll see you all very, very soon.